So our next session is focused on community resilience planning. I am Elizabeth Hornstein, the SRC Extension Professional for Suffolk County. So I will be helping to navigate this session. Before we dive in, we do have a couple of poll questions for you all to make sure everybody is still awake this morning. So for those that participated in the polls previously, you should be all set to answer. If you were not on this morning, you can join the poll using the link at the top or using your phone by texting LISRES to 22333, and we'll stick those instructions in the chat as well. If you're using your phone, please wait till it says you've joined and then you can submit your answer. So this question is, what is the biggest climate threat or issue in your community? It's that word cloud type, so one word answers are best, or you can link your words by using underscores when you type in your answer. So I'll give everybody a minute or so to answer this question. I see flooding is so far looking like the winner here. Okay, a few more seconds, and then we're going to move to our second question. Great. Flooding was definitely the winner, but there is a lot of other answers out there, so a lot of different issues that you guys are facing. Okay, our second question, we would like to know, where are you in the resilience planning process? Are you just getting started? Are you conducting a vulnerability assessment, developing a resilience plan, or maybe implementing a plan? So I'll give everybody a little bit to answer this one. Okay, I'm seeing a good number just getting started. So hopefully this session is going to be really useful. And then some of you kind of in that planning phase and a few people implementing the plan. Give everybody maybe a few more seconds. I know people are probably still maybe trickling back from the stretch break. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else coming in, so I think we're going to go ahead and move on. So I'm really excited about this session. Adam Welchel, with the Director of Science with Nature Conservancy Connecticut, is going to be our facilitator for this session. And then we have 3 talks from local government representatives. They're going to be speaking about their experience with resilience planning and providing some tips and advice. And at the end of all the presentations, we will have time for Q&A with all of our presenters. So throughout the presentations, you can feel free to enter your questions in the chat, and we will record those and then try to answer as many questions as we can after everybody has spoken. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Adam and let him take it away to kick things off.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And first and foremost, thank you to Elizabeth and Sarah with the Sustainable and Resilient Community team for getting us prepared for this. And we've got a fantastic lineup, as Elizabeth mentioned. We've got folks from Connecticut, Westchester, as well as over in Long Island and Port Jefferson to give you some insights. And it's fantastic that many of you are just starting or are developing a plan, because this is the perfect suite of talks for you. So we're super excited for this. I'm going to give a little overview of some of the work that I do, and then we'll get right into the good stuff from John, Nick, and Rebecca in a moment. So if I could just, okay, so one of the questions I always get asked is, what is community resilience building and why? Why should we do it? Well, some of the benefits that I usually fall back on or highlight are that by going through this process of sitting down and building community around resilience, you run the risk of strengthening your community via collaborative discussions, the old-fashioned way, sitting down and having conversations. You run the risk of increasing community engagement in your hazard mitigation plan and comp plans, or what we call in Connecticut, plans of conservation and development. Also, the idea of being able to identify and prioritize meaningful actions for your community as a community, resulting in the development of prioritized catalog of projects with partners. And then, of course, finding ways and means to collaborate with surrounding municipalities, perhaps thinking a little bit regionally, and of course, thinking about Long Island Sound and how we all contribute to the health and viability of that system going forward. Some of the overarching objectives of the Community Resilience Building Process, or CRB, really come from a hazard mitigation perspective, but with some important differences. For example, we really overweight the strengths. What are you already doing that works well, be it policy, project, certain people, as well as vulnerability comprehensively? We use the process to define appropriate actions to reinforce those strengths and reduce vulnerability. Go through the hard work of prioritizing a list of actions collaboratively, and then, of course, identifying opportunities across your community and in with your region, for example, Long Island Sound. We've had the privilege of working with over 500 plus communities or so across 14 states. One of the things that communities love about it is that it's flexible. It's a framework through which they can realize the future vision of themselves. Can be work anywhere, large, small, inland, coastal, rural, urban, disadvantaged, wealthy, from a neighborhood scale all the way up through watershed and state. While it comes from an all hazards type of approach, it really is a good opportunity and a workbench, as we've seen lately, to integrate health, sustainability, equity, and of course the pandemic. We've been doing this since 2008, so we've had the ability to really bend and accommodate and adapt to changes in larger scales. In Connecticut, we've had the privilege of working with many communities. Hopefully you see yourself in there. East Haddam is one of them, and we'll hear from them in a moment, and a couple of academic universities. Well, we are open for business, and so if you see something of value, please contact me, and I'll give you my stuff in a moment here. These are the locations we've worked with. If you go one further, we'll give you a little showcase, John. This East Haddam coming up here in a moment. Next slide, please. Everything you would need in order to do one of these workshops or processes is available for free through the Nature Conservancy's website here. You can go in there and take a look at guides or agendas and take a look at some of the reports that have come out of these processes. If you're looking for examples of what does a climate action plan look like or resilience plan look like, you can go and visit with some of your neighbors that have gone through this process. And finally, if you want to contact me, this is my information. And again, we're open for business. I love working with municipalities, and we can often do this at very little to no charge. Excellent. Okay, let's move forward into the good stuff here. As Elizabeth mentioned, we've got a fantastic panel here. We have John Olin, who's going to come up next. He's with the town of East Haddam Conservation Commission. Then we'll hear from Nick Sophis, who's the Sustainable Coordinator in the city of New Rochelle, New York. And then we'll hear from Rebecca Cassay, who's the Deputy Mayor of the village of Port Jefferson. And so as we go through these presentations, which will be about 10 minutes apiece, We want you to be paying attention to and listening for things that will help you, obviously, as you advance down this path of resilience, but also commonalities and connection points between the various speakers here. A little crossword puzzle, a little chess, just to kind of keep us all connecting the dots here. And we'll come back after the presentations and ask that very same question. What are those connection points and what are those commonalities across the three town, city, and village that we're about to hear from? So, John, with that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much, John. You're on mute, John. John, you're still.
You're on mute.
Thank you so much, Adam, for the extraordinarily important supportive role that you play, without which literally we wouldn't be here. The first slide, everyone is a stakeholder. Building a resilient and sustainable community in our town has brought together a broad and diverse range of people. We're fortunate to have inclusive town government where residents can serve on town committees and commissions, such as for sustainability and conservation. Officials from various town departments are actively participating, as well as business owners, farmers, teachers, and a Boy Scout troop. Residents and homeowners also who are concerned about the impacts of extreme weather. But we are far from finished. Our goal is to engage everyone, because in meeting the challenges we face, every resident is a stakeholder, and everyone is needed to build sustainable and resilient communities. Slide 2, please. Our work is illustrated by the intersecting lines of this graphic, the three layers that go into creating resilience: place, people, and projects. Next slide, please. Let's start with place. The Long Island Sound drainage basin connects all of us, north and south, east and west. Water shapes our lives, inside and out. This one, this is one of the boundaries of our home. We are all neighbors. We're in East Haddam. We're in the region number 5 that was referred to before. Next slide, please. Let's start with place. Within this basin, I'd like to call it a bioregion. East Haddam, Connecticut sits on the east bank of the Connecticut River, about 16 miles up from the river's mouth in Long Island Sound. Residents and visitors love this place for its rural character and natural beauty. We have extensive protected forest areas, lakes and streams, 4 state parks, and many recreational and cultural opportunities. As I mentioned, the town is working on sustainability and resilience. We have met the activity criteria of Sustainable CT for the bronze certification and are working on silver. In addition, the program called Resilient Connecticut of the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, CIRCA, has chosen our town for a study of a watercourse which periodically floods the village. More about that in a moment. Next slide, please. The following photographs are of the lower Connecticut River Valley. Gillette Castle may be viewed in this photo. Next slide. This is Whalebone Cove, a freshwater tidal marsh, an extremely unique ecological area. The lower, next slide, please. The lower river is recognized as a natural and national treasure, protected, to name a few organizations, by the Connecticut River Gateway Commission, the Connecticut River Council of Governments, RiverCog, the Audubon's Roger Tory Peterson Estuary Center, the National Estuarine Research Reserves of NOAA, and the Long Island Sound Study and Sea Grant CT, for all of which we are very indebted. Next slide. People. The next number of slides will show East Haddam residents engaged in various resilience and sustainability activities. The Conservation Commission and the Sustainability Team have sponsored some. The Land Trust, East Haddam Land Trust, is also a partner, and indispensable assistance is given by Sustainable CT and the Nature Conservancy in CT, about which I will say more in a moment. Next slide. This shows a few of our community leaders. On the center, Pete Govert with the Land Trust, Mary Ellen Kling, who is active in many of our organizations and a former Secretary of the Aging for Connecticut. The tall fellow there is Mark Theed, who runs a cafe called the Two Wrestling Cats, which is a center for many community activities. Over on the right is Amalia Shaltil, who's the coordinator for the sustainability team. Next slide, please. In the center there, we have the container that was basically brought about by Boy Scouts and many town residents who provided the matching funds so that with Sustainable CT, they were able to purchase this for our transfer center. In the center is, in the purple is our chief executive, the first select woman, Irene Haynes, who was very, very cooperative in many of our sustainability and resilience activities. Next slide, please. Boy Scouts recycling returnables. Next slide, please. And we work with all kinds of in all kinds of situations on the farm. That's Cold Spring Farm in East Haddam, where a group of students is harvesting carrots that they had planted. And there's business owner Mark in his cafe, which adjoins the People Cafe. Next slide. We held a public forum on climate in September, and that's on the right, a photo of the Land Trust's annual music festival with the Gelston House in the background. Next slide. Public meetings, a number of public meetings on various issues. Here we have conversations on the left about development, and on the right, a presentation on our forests by a member of the DEEP staff. Next slide. All kinds of situations are providing opportunities. Neighborhood groups are important. We've discussed having local, very localized emergency response teams. In the middle, obviously, person-to-person contact, relationships are developed. And then on the far right, the Repair Cafe, sponsored by our sustainability team, brought people together with their toasters and other items for repair to reduce our both our waste and our commercial buying. So next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the educational process that we had to go through, that we went through 2 years ago, beginning about 2 years ago. A handful of us felt the need to do something about climate change as it impacted our town. We were told by a multi-generational resident that we should proceed slowly with this climate change thing. There were headwinds. We did our homework and set up a subcommittee on the Conservation Commission. We published an article in the local newspaper about a changing environment. We started a conversation, next slide, please, about building community resilience. And about that time, Circa's Resilient Connecticut 2.0 project was getting underway in Eastern Connecticut, and we invited them to come to the town, and in due course, they assessed us as having vulnerabilities for flooding and also for heat. Next slide. And in April of this year, the Nature Conservancy offered their great community resilience building workshop. And this article in the newspaper came out around that time and indicates that the town is actually taking an active part in dealing with the impacts of a changing climate. Next slide. The summary of findings on the left was produced by the Nature Conservancy and gives us a roadmap to identify and address resilience priorities. In July, we followed up with a meeting at the municipal building to drill down on these priorities. And I should mention that these meetings, both the workshop and the follow-up meeting, involved about 25 community leaders, and some neighboring towns participated, and regional resources as well, RiverCog, for example. The implementation work continues at this moment. Meanwhile, Circa completed their evaluation of opportunity areas in the lower river and chose East Haddam for a study concept design for remediation of flooding of Sucker Brook. And on the right, you see a document that reflects our participation with Circa. And indeed, an environmental engineering firm has been chosen, and we expect their work to start soon. This will position us at a later phase for state and federal grant applications to remedy a longstanding problem. Next slide. This is actually from a YouTube recording of an East Haddam meeting in July, in which the participants of the workshop, of the Nature Conservancy workshop, also were there. You can see we have the first select woman. We have on the far right the managing director of the Goodspeed Opera, which is a destination, a cultural destination, and also their properties are affected in this flooding. We have members from the health district, the Youth and Family Services, and also the sustainability team.
Hey, John.
Slide. Yes.
John, my friend, we're going to need to wrap up a little bit here.
Okay, move on to the next few slides then. How much time do I have? This is a view of Sucker Brook. Next slide. Next slide. Some sort of a refrigerator scramble, things that we're used to and working on. And next slide. I'll finish up with a mention of the seriousness of our situation. We're in a worldwide climate crisis. I was in Phoenix recently and observed some of the effects of the terrible summer they had there, which was experienced all around the world as well. Next slide. I'll finish with mentioning Mystic Seaport has an exhibition of Alexis Rockman's painting, a kind of unnatural view of the ocean, and some of the unfortunate legacy of extinctions. Next slide. While the ocean is resilient, it absorbs vast amounts of CO2, but there's a limit to the amount of CO2 the upper layer will absorb before releasing CO2 back into the atmosphere. Next slide. I'll finish up with a mention of a native of Huntington, Suffolk County, a lover of the shoreline, of what he called fish-shaped Paumanok, a Native American name for Long Island. Just last word, I think our work is terribly important. It is very likely the buffer for an uncertain and stormy future. And I'm encouraged by this group, and especially having learned about the resource hub that the Long Island Sound Study is offering us. And I thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks so much, John. Okay, we'd like to move on to Nick Sophis, Sustainable Coordinator, the wonderful city of New Rochelle, New York. Thanks so much for being here, Nick. And quickly for everybody, again, be paying attention to connection points and commonalities, and please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you to the SCR team and for all the presenters and participants here for joining us. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go through a brief intro. Going to give you an overview of New Rochelle and New Rochelle sustainability programming, and then we'll jump right into the climate vulnerability assessment project and give you some background on the funding, the implementation, and the findings. Next slide, please. So the city of New Rochelle, the Queen City of the Sound. If you don't know where we are, here's a map to help. We're right here, Lower Westchester County on the Sound. We're a rather diverse city, both or economically, geographically, and demographically. We're a rather large city, the 7th largest in the state, the 22nd largest municipality in New York. And we have a rather robust sustainability program since 2011. We adopted the Greener Sustainability Plan, which set out a vision and action for a healthier community by establishing some sustainability themes, goals, and actions similar to the New York State Climate Smart Communities program, which I'll get into in a moment. In 2021, the City Council adopted a resolution declaring a climate emergency that directs the city manager to pursue a climate mobilization effort. Next slide, please. So the Climate Smart Communities program is available to New York State municipalities. It's a voluntary program where you pledge your intent to achieve climate adaptation, resiliency, and mitigation objectives. So it's really a guide for local climate action. And the way that it works, after you pledge, you then pursue different actions that add up to points. And you need a certain number of points and actions completed in order to then be certified. And then separately, there's both that certification aspect and then as well as a funding aspect. So you can receive funding through the New York State CSC for in 2 categories. There's an implementation grants category, which I'm not going to get into so much, but it's important to note here because they have an adaptation category, funding category, which provides funding for a lot of what we've been talking about here in terms of resiliency actions that help communities adapt to the risks, whether they be flooding or heat, and so what. Related to climate change. What we're going to get into more so is a certification grant, which we received to perform a climate vulnerability assessment. And so the way that the CSC program is organized is by pledge elements. And so what we're working under is this Enhancing Community Resilience PE7 category here. And so certain actions, mainly these priority actions, qualify for certification grants. So the city applied for one of these grants before my time, I believe it was in 2021. We received that grant shortly after I joined, end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And then we've gone about procuring a consultant and performing that grant and project this year. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the purpose of just taking a step back, purpose of a climate vulnerability assessment as New York State CSC guidance kind of shows is that it's the first step in enhancing a community's resilience by being able to identify what the risks and hazards are in a community related to a changing climate. And so the city's CVA, there's different categories that you can achieve under the CSC. There's depending on how many hazards that you study, as well as the geographic area that you study. The city pursued the most comprehensive, the most point total that you can get for a CVA project. And therefore it's meant to cover all of the hazards across the entire geographic area of the city. But, thinking about climate equity, climate justice, we wanted to also emphasize the importance of recognizing how some disadvantaged and vulnerable populations feel the impacts of climate change disproportionately. So we've set out a few different project components, as well as trying to really get at the heart of what the purpose of the CVA is, which is to assess all of the resources with risk, including natural resources. So, this was a multifaceted project that has several components that really come together through a lot of desk work data, combining lived experiences, community outreach, to produce a report that highlights different ways of mapping data and visualizing data that can then help inform a matrix and some forward-looking actions I'll get into. I just want to highlight with our community engagement plan, we were able to get over 250 surveys actually completed. Next slide, please. So these are some of the main categories that our consultants looked at here, including extreme heat, inland flooding, increased precipitation, sea level rise, and then kind of like a catch-all of other risk categories, everything from extreme weather and wind to harmful algae blooms, water and air quality. We can go on a bit. Next slide, please. So before I jump into this risk in particular, I just want to kind of give an overview of how the consultants pursued this. And first, addressing what is climate. Climate really is the average weather that we experience. So it's in more detail or statistical description in terms of the mean and variability of meteorological variables such as temperature, precipitation, wind over a period of time. So in order to project how those variables may play out in the future, depending on the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, the International Panel for Climate Change, the ICPP, the leading kind of authority, global authority on being able to interpret climate science, creates this framework of representative concentration pathways, RCPs. And so New Rochelle utilized, at the behest of our consultants, two RCPs, a 4.5 and an 8.5, where RCP 4.5, and I'm sorry, just to take a step back, these are kind of summarizing what the conditions, these meteorological conditions will be in the future, depending on the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere. So under 4.5, we see that there is climate mitigation, that we actually achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2100, yet we're still likely to exceed global increased temperatures of over 2 degrees Celsius, while 8.5 represents a scenario of business as usual. And as you can see here, just in terms of extreme hot day hazards, we see a rather drastic increase in the number of extreme hot days throughout the century, under both scenarios, and particularly under the business as usual scenario in New Rochelle. And then on the mapping on the right-hand side shows how this is just an experience, not even projecting into the future, how it experienced on August 5th of this year, the disparate kind of conditions in terms of how people realize temperature at the ground level, and how microclimate factors such as soil type, pervious surface, tree canopy coverage can really impact, what is being felt throughout the city, even currently, not even so much in the future. Next slide, please. I'm going to try and move along here. So again, we did a similar assessment for seasonal total precipitation, and the main takeaway here, which we've kind of been experiencing, is more intense, more frequent heavy downpours compared to more frequent, smaller rain events. And in particular, we had a finding that this is likely to be experienced more so in the winter seasons, thinking of nor'easters possibly. Next slide, please, just to keep moving us along. So we had a rather robust public engagement process, which included both an online and in-person surveying, as well as pop-up events where we presented this information to the community in different formats, as well as online webinars. This is just high level showing how our survey results kind of corresponds to the census data that we have available for New Rochelle, and in terms of geographic input, this kind of corresponds, or does correspond, to the population density in the various neighborhoods of New Rochelle as well. Next slide, please.
Part of the house where most.
And then here we'll see into some of the input that we received from survey respondents regarding the different climate hazards that they are experiencing. So 10%, or I'm sorry, a lot of people are experiencing increased heat and cold related disruption, or I'm sorry, increased storm and heat related disruptions, as well, not as many cold related disruptions. Important in terms of thinking about public health, and how climate change and these hazards also impact some of the resources that also enhance public health, thinking about natural vegetation, as well as stress on invasive species. People all provided good input in these different categories. Next slide, please. We also utilize a survey to think more so in terms of disaster response, thinking about modes of transportation, access to emergency shelters, and information during disasters, as well as green infrastructure and getting towards the concept of adaptation and resiliency in a forward-looking way. Next slide, please. So some of the top priorities of the community ended up being vulnerable populations, people with chronic diseases, as well as, some of the infrastructure risks. Top priorities were drinking water supply and the drainage system. And some environmental risks, we had the coastline, habitat loss, and wetlands. And harping back on what Adam was saying in the introduction, thinking about how this kind of cross functions with each other. Next slide, please. And then we wrapped up the project's still underway, but the goal is to really kind of get towards the resiliency hub forward-looking plan, and thinking of resiliency hubs as both tangible and intangible services. Could be both tangible and intangible locations, web-based or physically a building, where residents and community members are already comfortable and that they can go for information and services that help improve their ability to withstand hazards from climate change, both on like a daily basis as well as in times of stress and disaster. And that's all I have. You can.
Excellent. Thanks
slide.
so much, Nick. Queen City on the Sound. I hadn't heard that before. That's wonderful. Thanks so much for being here today. Great. Now we get a chance to move on and hear from Rebecca Cassay, the Deputy Mayor from the Village of Port Jefferson. And Rebecca, you got your full 10, so take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers who preceded this talk. I know we had a great planning call, and I thought instead of focusing on my specific community here, which like all of us on this call, we have our specificities about the places that we're looking to address. I thought I'd tap into my community organizing background and sort of just give us a step-by-step to how I often approach climate issues and other issues in a community setting to try to make change, whatever that change might be. So this is focused on smaller municipalities. So again, myself being elected at a village level, NGOs or individuals to try to make the most of their climate efforts. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to blow through these so I have more time later. Obviously, global problem, climate change, there's these widespread causes. It's very overwhelming. We in our little municipalities or nonprofit groups, or even the Long Island Sound, it's sometimes we sit down at the end of the day and say, well, what can we really do? Next slide, please. Sometimes there's finger pointing or doubt. Again, if whatever we do here, there's still all of this going on all around the world. So is it, can we really do anything? I'll just skip to the answer. The answer is absolutely yes. And so I'm just going to walk through sort of how I keep myself and my community and the groups that I work with motivated and on task, and really being as effective as we can with everybody's time, energy, and thoughtfulness. So we're going to walk through kind of 4 steps, starting with identifying the local problem or problems you're looking to confront, teaming up, resolving your approach to solving the problem or mitigating the problem, and then reflecting on your success. Next slide, please. So identifying the problem to me is step 1. So obviously a problem is climate change, looking for climate resilient strategies. But as we've heard in this webinar and many others that many of us have attended, there are so many different issues that fall under that umbrella. So that can be overwhelming, and that can lead people to step back or feel demotivated by that overwhelming nature of the issues. So often starting by picking one or a small number of issues that are attainable to see change locally is the best way to get yourself started. So if you're really upset about water quality or carbon capture, you know, a local example might be, can we establish a sugar kelp farm in a local waterway, which again takes a ton of effort, but it's something that you could see happening and calculate the change making. If you want to reduce waste, maybe looking at a local composting program. If you want to restore habitat, you know, look for opportunities either on municipal or encouraging private homeowners to convert their lawn or grass areas into native gardens or bioswales or woodland to accomplish that. Mitigating flooding, again, bioswales, rain gardens. Next slide, please. Teaming up. So as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, going at these things alone is impossible. I think that you know, John's examples of community coming together, it shows that not only is that more and a more effective way to reach your goals, but also I really enjoyed seeing those slides. There's that beauty of community togetherness, that humanity that we all share and crave these days in the world of disconnect. And so, you know, look for opportunities to see where there are folks who are already self-identified to care about the issue that you're looking to tackle. So you've resolved, okay, we're going to, I'll just walk through an example that I had in the municipality here. So I wondered, do Port Jefferson residents have any interest in a community garden? And so I had put, you know, that was something I identified. It helps with a number of resilience issues, and also, you know, the social and you know, it has many benefits for that program. So I put that out on social media and said, hey, is anyone interested? And then 10 or 11 community members stepped up and said, yes, we'll be part of a core group to get that going, because that's something that's really important to us. So that was one method I used to reach out to people. But I also reached out to other community gardens in the area to see, you know, what they had done. I talked to my fellow elected officials. I reached out to some nonprofits, the Civic Association, Scout troops got involved. I'm in the Rotary. And so, you know, these are some examples. So if everyone wants to jump on the chat and just, if you have any other, you know, either these or other groups or ways to connect with people to help with your climate resilience efforts, please feel free to throw them in the chat so that we can continue that brainstorm and help others if they haven't quite thought of reaching out there yet. So we'll just give everyone a minute to do that. Who do you team up with when you're looking to tackle your climate resilience issue? Neighbors, yeah, neighbors who have gardens, absolutely. So the connections you already have are already established. They trust you, they know you, and so they're more likely to jump in on these conversations. Yep, partner organizations, HOAs is another great example. Universities, absolutely. Here we have Stony Brook University, so we use them as a resource often. YMCA, public libraries, churches, other religious organizations, local businesses, absolutely. These are all fantastic. So, you know, those, thank you, museums. So those are all great examples. And, you know, I encourage everyone to, you know, sort of chat those down. I'm going to try to grab them out of the chat and add them to my slide for next time. Friends, starting with friends is always a great thing too. Next slide, please. All right, resolving your approach. So what combination? So we're going to go through a combination of local code, law, or policy change, volunteer activation, youth engagement, fundraising, and public education are sort of the 5 major approaches that I've identified for this. There are definitely other approaches that fall into other categories, but for the purpose of this 10-minute presentation, I wanted to focus on those. So we're going to walk through each of those separate, you know, individually, but often when you're once you have identified the issue you're looking to confront and the method to do so, you pick your team and you talk to them and say, okay, well, how do we want to go about this? Then you're going to use some combination of these approaches in order to tackle that that issue with the group that you've put together. Next slide, please. So obviously, being an elected official, this is the focus that I always have at front of mind. How can one change, look to modify the local code, law, or policy in order to strengthen climate resilience efforts and other efforts. So I never want to reinvent the wheel. I am bowled over by how many resources we've been shown already today, and the impact that those will have on everybody's everybody's efforts moving forward. So I'm so grateful for those. We saw the Resilience Hub, NOAA's tools that they offered, the Nature Conservancy. So, definitely looking to see what have other people done already and what has worked, and how can maybe we adapt that to our municipality. Being realistic about that adaptation is something that's very, very important. And then identifying an elected official or a staff member or a committee or board, so maybe the Conservation Advisory Council or similar, will help amplify your call to action. Next slide, please. So I always have to stop and remember that not everyone is a climate scientist or enthusiast. I have a science background, but not everyone on the board does. So you have to learn how to speak their language too. Electeds are also juggling all sorts of issues, from potholes to social events to everything. So you have to find a way to incorporate this into everything that they're working on. Often having a brief, impactful, digestible education packet for local officials is a great way to get this in front of their eyes. And of course, being polite. A polite but squeaky wheel is good. If you don't get a response first time, don't be discouraged. You could email follow up, go to a public meeting, and definitely seek those power in numbers. So again, being by yourself at a public meeting is intimidating, but if you have a civic group behind you, or even a scout troop, young people are always great. We're going to go to that next, and definitely persisting, with a respectful, friendly approach. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm speaking a mile a minute. I just thought I'd get through everything. Volunteer activation. So again, I always remind myself, because I don't like asking people for other things, but I have to remember that when you're asking if someone wants to be involved in this, you're giving them an opportunity to mitigate their own concerns about climate issues. So people can be anxious, but you're giving them a chance to confront that anxiety. Find that tribe, pull them together, and keep each other's energy up. Next slide, please. With youth, again, I know I'm at 10, so I'm going to just blow through this, but I think you'll have access to these slides. Youth are some of the strongest advocates that you can find and engage. Don't only ask them to do things, but ask them what they would like to do, and you will be amazed at what comes out of that. Next slide, please. Fundraising, I'm not going to spend much time on this. This is something that, locally seek grant funding, private foundations, all of it. All the resources that have been given us today, please reference those to help your cause. Next slide, please. Public outreach and education. You have social media, press releases, letters to the editor, and speaking at public meetings are all great ways to make sure that the issue that you're looking to bring into the social and political realm is out there, and is becoming part of what people are thinking about. Next, please. And then reflecting on your success is so important, and the steps along your process, because again, these are huge, overwhelming issues, and we have to, for ourselves and the people we're working with, remember that if we become discouraged, then we kind of fade away, and then we don't keep at it. And so definitely be each other's cheerleaders, and in the teams that you're working on. Keep part of these wider community and networks. Again, presentations like John's, where you get to be proud of the work you've done and see that it's possible. If you're just starting out on your path, and being grateful for everyone else's efforts along the way. Okay, and that's it. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for everything that you've done, are doing, and will do in the future. It is absolutely making a change, and we're all in this together. So if I could ever be of assistance, reach out anytime.
Excellent. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, John. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca, I want to be a sugar kelp farmer. That sounds so fun. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, all of your insights, and being on the path here and helping everybody out by contributing your time and energy. Okay, we're going to do one little quick thing here. I'm going to ask Sarah to help. We're going to put up a little poll, and there's going to be two questions. There's one of them. There's both of them. What was your biggest takeaway? And did you hear any commonalities among presenters? So go ahead. There's instructions from Sarah. We'll see what pops up here. Hopefully you're so captivated. You soaked all this in, and you're just can't wait to share some of your. There it is. Collaboration is key, no doubt. Let's give a little bit here, see what pops up. Well, partners are important. It's a lot we can do for sure. Intersections, humans and the environment. We heard that in all three collaborations. Yes. Excellent. Yes, amazing tools available. Zoning needs. Rebecca, you hit on that big time. Community organizing. Nick, do you have Boy Scouts? I heard Boy Scouts in every single one of these so far. Positivity. Yes, positivity. Partner up. Communities are passionate. Yes, they live there. We live there. Excellent. Shared goals. Cool. Keep them coming. Persistence and collaboration, supporting each other. Excellent. Okay. I guess we can kind of maybe keep these coming and just for entertainment purposes. But I did want to ask a question of our panelist. And, given the number of folks that are at the early stages or in development stages of coming up with a plan or gathering and collaborating with like-minded partners, et cetera, in your community, I wanted to go back to you, John. And if you could just give us one thing that you wish you had known before you started down this path of resilience planning in your community, just one item that comes to mind that you could share with folks, maybe a little wisdom.
Uh, actually, I wish I could have known how excited people became in actually doing something and not having that feeling that, it's all beyond us. So many people came together with good ideas and are continuing down this path to make our community more safe for everyone.
Thanks, John. Nick, how about you? What's something that you'd wish you'd known before you embarked on this path of resilience with New Rochelle? The city, the Queen City on the Sound. I love that.
That's a good question, Adam. Um,
Pretend like you were just starting from scratch and like, wow, I wish I'd known that.
well, the first thing that comes to mind is internal kind of logistics about how to get an RFP off the ground and things of that nature. But in terms of the actual project, patience with the process is key when you're working with consultants. But being proactive while you're waiting for them to do their part of the job, in terms of reaching out and making sure that others are aware of what's going on is key. But most importantly, I feel like I try to do this throughout, so I don't necessarily regret it. But I think from the start, you should try to think dynamically about each project and think about kind of like Rebecca was saying, the goal that you're trying to achieve at first, but really also what's led up to that goal. Like, so what are past considerations, as well as, especially when you're dealing with this and trying to think about the future, how do those past those past factors play into that goal and what you're trying to achieve in the future? So thinking about really how the land use has changed over time, I think, is most important. Does that make
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Thanks so much, Nick. Rebecca, something you'd wish you'd known when you started working on resilience planning in Port Jeff?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things I've learned, and I love to share, is that again, we're fortunate on a webinar like this to be surrounded with people who already care about these issues. but that the need to learn others' perspectives and priorities and learn how to translate climate resilience importance into someone else's language. So for instance, if I have colleagues on the board and myself included, where fiscal responsibility is so important. And so, I can talk about the importance of the ecosystems and all of these other elements all day long, but those aren't priorities to them. But when I say, hey, if we're planning a big infrastructure project and we're basing it on data from the past 50 years and not data from the coming 50 years, that's not a fiscally responsible move for the municipality, because if we're not accounting for this climate data, then this infrastructure project might only last 10 to 20 years when, in the past it would have lasted half a century, because things are changing. And so keeping money in the conversation all the time seems to get people's ears to open up a little bit more. And again, thankfully, there are so many resources that show the value of planting trees. New York City has an incredible calculator, and I think the Nature Conservancy as well, or the Arbor Day Foundation, I forget. But you can calculate the value, and so it sounds very cold and heartless. But when you show people the financial benefit of looking at climate resilience, it really can reach a greater number of people. The scope of folks outside of this call.
Excellent. Thanks, Rebecca. Well, all great things have to come to an end at some point, and we're at that moment in our workshop day. But before we retire from this session, we wanted to offer John, Nick, and Rebecca just a quick, about a minute apiece, some final thoughts, something you want to leave this community of practice here that's engaging in all things resilience and moving things forward. So John, what's a quick 1 minute kind of reflection on this topic from you?
Well, I'm very optimistic that so many of us here in this room and so many in our communities are coming together, working together. It's an opportunity that flows over into other domains of their life, the life of a community, working on sustainability, working on resilience, understanding our deep connection to the natural world, and then acting and changing behavior, slowly educating one another and moving towards a brighter future.
Excellent, John. Thank you. Nick, what are your thoughts on the day? What do you want to leave somebody with here? Are you with us, Nick? Looks like you're on mute.
Sorry, Adam.
Yeah, final thoughts?
So for New York communities, it's important to remember how there's a lot of support from the state down, and these regional organizations, and I'm not sure who it might be for Long Island, but in Westchester, there's a Hudson Valley Regional Council that helps as an intermediary with the CSC and other state programs, identifying how best to utilize them. And they were tremendous. They were tremendous help on an ongoing basis for me. And just want to make sure that people don't forget about them to kind of help get their efforts off the ground.
Thanks, Nick. Rebecca?
Sure. I think for me, it's always don't try to reinvent the wheel, and don't feel like you have to have, maybe you and your community will have some groundbreaking new way to confront an issue. But again, I could not be more excited about the Resilience Hub that we were just previewed earlier in this call. That is exactly the sort of thing I saw someone put in the chat, using model code for policy and code changes and law changes. These things are so important to avoid some, definitely not all, but some of that banging your head against the wall feeling of, how are we going to make progress? And do not be shy to reach out to the people who have been doing currently or have accomplished something that you're looking to accomplish, because they are so excited to give you the roadmap that they followed and give you those tips along the way to help you have a shorter, more effective route to the goal that you've shared. So definitely, community is key, and we're all in this together. So no action is too small. No voice is too small, and the more that you empower others, the more that we're going to accomplish and help help keep the Long Island Sound healthy and a beautiful place for the current and future residents who share the watershed.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Rebecca. We packed a lot in there. Hopefully it was both enlightening and entertaining for all of you out there. With that, we just like to say thank you and offer our deepest gratitude to the Sustainable and Resilient Community Team, Elizabeth and Sarah, for getting us all here and having this discussion. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you to all of our speakers. I think that was fantastic. Hopefully everybody enjoyed all of the talks and that session. And we will be sharing the recording and the slides and resources after the workshop.